All right, today's lesson is going to be on graphing using an input-output table. So when we look at this, we're going to graph when graphing using an input-output table, you're going to choose numbers to substitute in for x into the equation in order to solve for y. So your equation may say something like y equals 2x plus 3. So you're going to substitute a set of numbers in for x in order to solve for y in order to get your equation and to get your coordinates to plot on your graph. A key note that you need to understand and realize is that your equation must always say y equals. If it does not have a y equals and then the rest of it, then you need to manipulate it in order to get it to say y equals. All right, so let's go ahead and start on the first one here. We have y equals x plus 2. And so I have a set of numbers in here that I like to choose for x. You can really choose whatever numbers you like, whatever you are most comfortable with. I always just choose these because it just makes it a little bit easier. Sorry about that. So we'll go ahead and put those in now. So I have y equals x plus 2, and instead of writing x, I'm going to rewrite the equation to say y equals negative 2 plus 2. So I know when my x is negative 2 and negative 2 plus 2 is 0. So then my y is going to equal 0. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put that in my table. All right. And just to save room, I'm going to erase these after each one just so that you can see everything. All right, so now my x is going to equal negative 1. All right, so I have y equals, and instead of writing x, I'm going to go ahead and write negative 2, or negative 1 plus 2. So negative 1 plus 2 is 1. So I'll go ahead and I'll put that into my chart now that I have solved for that. So let me go ahead and erase that. All right, the next one tells us that y equals, and instead of x, I'm going to write 0, because that's what number I'm on, plus 2. And we know that y, 0 plus 2, is just 2. So when my x is 0, my y is going to be 2. All right, now we have x to equal 1. So we have y equals 1 plus 2. So y equals 3. All right, and we have one more to do before we can go ahead and graph our points. We have x equals 2. So we have y equals 2 plus 2, which gives us 4. So you can see here that we have substituted numbers in for x in order to solve y, and we have created an input-output table by doing that. Now that we've created our input-output table, we need to go ahead and graph and plot our points. So the first thing that we're going to do is my x is negative 2 and my y is 0. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to plot that negative 2, 0. And that's going to put me right there. All right. The next one that I'm going to have is negative 1 and 1, which would be right about there. All right. And then when I have x to 0, y is 2. All right. And then I have x to equal 1 and y is 3. Okay. And then the last one I have is x is 2 and y is 4. So you can see quite a nice little line there. So I'm not quite finished yet. I still have to connect it and make sure that I draw a long line that covers all of my graph and that has arrows at the end. All right, and then after that you are finished with that problem. So let's go ahead and move on to the next one that we have. So now our equation says y equals 2x plus 3. Now the first thing we need to look is to make sure that we have a y equals, which we do. So we can go ahead and start plugging in our numbers in for x. So I'm going to do that over to the side here. So we have y equals 2. And instead of writing x, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to substitute in this first number that we have right here, which is our -2. So instead of writing x, I'm going to write in -2. And then the rest of the equation says plus 3. All right, so to simplify this, I have y equals 2 times -2 is -4 plus 3. So my y equals -1. So when my x is -2, my y is going to equal -1. All right, and just like last time, I'm going to go ahead and erase what I have. But the only part that I'm going to erase in the top is what I'm substituting in for x, because everything else stays the same. So here, on my next one, my x is going to equal -1. So I have y equals 2 times -1 is -2 plus 3. So my y equals 1. So when my x is -1, my y is 1. And again, I'll go ahead and erase these. It's just to save room. You don't have to do that on your paper. I would actually prefer you to not erase so we can see your work. So now we have y equals 2 times, and my x this time is going to be 0. Oops, I don't know why I rewrote it, but we'll just roll with it. It'll be fine. So we have y equals 2 times 0 plus 3, and we know that 2 times 0 is always going to just be 0 plus 3, so y equals 3. Okay. And now for the next one, my x equals 1. So I have y equals 2 times 1 is 2 plus 3, so my y equals 5. I'll go ahead and I'll write that in my input-output chart. And then I have one more to do before I can go ahead and start graphing. So my last number is going to be 2. So I substitute the 2 in for x in my equation, and I have 2 times 2 is 4 plus 3, so y equals 7. All right, so now that I have all of my points, I can go ahead and I can graph it. So I want to erase all this just to save room. All right, so on my graph, I have my x to equal -2 and my y to equal -1, which is going to be right about there. All right, and then my next one is my x is -1 and my y is 1. So that's going to be about here. And then I have 0 and 3. And then 1 and 5. Oops. Too far. And then 2 and 7, which is right almost off the charts. All right, I'm still not done though. I have to connect the dots, make sure we always do that, and we want our line to go through completely through the graph, and we always need our arrows going each way. So that is the answer for that problem. We're going to go ahead and we're going to do another one together, and this one says -x plus y equals 6. Now, first of all, when we look at this, we know that there's something that we have to do before we can get started, and that's make sure that our equation says y equals. Right now, we do not have that. So we're going to have to do some manipulating of our numbers in order to get that. So we need to move this x over to the other side of the equation, and we know that in order to move it, we're going to have to do the opposite of it. So if we have -x plus y equals 6, then I'm going to subtract, or I'm sorry, I'm going to add the x to both sides. So I'm going to say y equals x plus 6. And so this is the equation that I am going to use when I plug it into my input-output table. Okay, so that's what I'm going to use. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to write that down here in the corner. Y equals x plus 6. All right, and now I'm just going to go ahead and plug in the numbers that I chose for x right away so I can get started. So I have y equals -2 plus 6, so y equals 4. All right, and I'm going to erase what I have here. And the only thing I'm going to erase here is the number. All right, so now instead of x, I'm going to write -1. So y equals -1 plus 6. So we know that y equals 5. So I'll go ahead and I'll write that down on my chart. All right, so now I have 0. Y equals 0 plus 6, and we all know that y equals 6. All right. All right, now we have our x to equal 1. So y equals 6 plus 1, which is 7. And our last one, our last number for x is going to be 2. So it's y equals 2 plus 6, so y equals 8. All right, and again, I'm going to go ahead and erase this just so that I have room to plot my points. All right. Whoops. All right, so looking at this, my first corner I have is -2 and 4. So my x is -2 and my y is 4. You know what we're going to go ahead and do? I'm going to manipulate my graph a little bit, and I'm going to show that each of these marks, each one equals 2 spots. So I went ahead and I labeled it to show that each one is going to equal -2. That way my graph isn't, my line's not going to be that far off my graph. All right, so when we're graphing this, just remember that each point equals 2. So my x is -2 and my y is 4, which would be right here. All right, the next one is my x is -1 and my y is 5. So that'd be right about here. There we go. And then I have 0 and 6. Here, let me do those a little bit better for you. So there's 5. There's 6. All right. And then I have 1, +1 and 7. And then +2 and 8. All right, and again, I'm just going to draw the line for my whole graph, and I'm going to make sure that it covers all of it, and then I have my arrows going on each side. All right, and these next, we have 2 more problems, 2 more slides for you, and I want you to go ahead and I want you to try this equation on your own. So you're going to go ahead and draw your input-output table, and you're going to do your graph, and go ahead and pause the video now, do that, and then check back. All right, here is the solution to this equation. Check your input-output table and your graph to make sure that it matches up with mine. All right, and then just one more equation for you to work on. It's going to be 2x plus y equals 3. Don't forget to do your input-output table and your graph. So go ahead and pause the video now, work it out, and then check back to see if you were accurate. All right, and here is the solution for the last problem. You'll notice that with this one, we did not have y equals, so you needed to go ahead and manipulate the problem in order to get your y equals negative 2x plus 3, and then you have your input-output table and your graph. And that is the end of this video.